This conference will now be recorded.
Oh, no kidding. What you get for leaving?
Yes. As we were fixing that on Saturday, the other door broke.
All right, item number 1 on the agenda, consider approval of consent agenda items.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
Yes.
Malott,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 2, requests or comments from the public. Being none, we'll move on to item number 3, consider ordinance 1056 regarding eminent domain proceedings for the 98th Street project.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Just a quick overview. As you know, we're in process of reconstructing 98th Street from roughly Kansas Avenue North to the city limits. This project was funded in part through STP, which is a Surface Transportation Program, which is federal funding. Like all of these projects, the expense for right-of-way acquisition and utilities are borne solely by the city and are fairly regulated by the state. So the state has a set of rules by which we have to follow when we do acquisitions of rights of way. Therefore, when we have these projects, we typically will retain an individual or group to perform that work for us. In this case, we hired the firm of Orrick and Erskine. We have Mr. Tim Orrick here this evening with us, and he'd be happy to answer any technical questions that we might have about process. So we've been moving forward. We are hoping that this project will bid. It'll probably be the first of 2023, early in 2023. It is being moved up in the schedule in our discussions with Mid-America Regional Council because it was originally a fiscal year 2024 project, which doesn't occur till next October, but it's been moved to a 2023, which actually makes it eligible as early as October of this year. So as you know, we've been moving forward with the acquisition for a number of months. We originally retained Mr. Orrick in October. Through some of the early discussions, there were some minor modifications to the plans that did change some of the right-of-way necessary or easements, generally shrunk those, didn't make them bigger, made them less. And there was a total of 19 properties that we're acquiring. And I think currently we have 9 that are finalized, and a number of others that are in the process. I'll let Mr. Orrick kind of give the highlights of that here in just a minute. But now we're down to the point where we do a 2-step process in the eminent domain process. The first one was the adoption of a resolution, which we did in March 14th, that basically says that this is a public project and that it's eligible for use of eminent domain if necessary. The second part of that is the adoption of an ordinance, which basically says that we are going to move forward with that if we're unable to come to solutions on outstanding properties. It doesn't automatically mean we're going to the courthouse in the next day, which we will not be, but it does set the process in motion so that if we have properties that we just are unable to obtain through the negotiation process, again, it's a very specific process. I was telling the mayor earlier, this is different than buying a home or buying something else where you just kind of negotiate a price and go. You have to have certain specific pieces to the equations. So that is where we're at tonight. Is we're now ready to adopt that ordinance, and that's what you have before you. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I would probably ask Mr. Orrick to come up and just give you an overview. We don't talk about specific properties or values or cost. If there's any of those that we need to do, we could go into executive session to handle that. But generally, we do not. We don't negotiate in a public meeting on these properties. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Orrick. Some of y'all may have never met Mr. Orrick because quite honestly, he's kind of behind the scenes. And most of us probably in the room haven't met him before. So I'll let him introduce himself and what he's doing with us.
Good evening. Like I said, I'm Tim Orrick. I've got a small law firm, Orrick and Erskine, and most of what we do is represent state agencies such as KDOT, MoDOT, municipalities, utilities, helping them acquire their rights of way, and when necessary, taking cases through the eminent domain process. As Mike indicated, we've been working very closely together over the last months and sort of guiding the process through appraisal, making written offers, engaging in negotiations, which is, again, kind of where we are and where we'll continue to be. We really never give up negotiating unless somebody just says, don't talk to me anymore. Nothing you do tonight will stop ongoing negotiations. Even if we were to get to the point where filing the eminent domain petition is necessary, our door is always open. And again, we don't ever cut any discussions off. So as Mike indicated, there's about 19 properties. And about half are complete. We're in negotiations with the remainder. There's one that we're having a difficult time reaching, but other than that, we're engaged with the remaining folks, and again, looking forward to moving as many of them toward resolution before we file. Mike and I have talked about timeline, probably give it through the month of July before we would file, and again, even then, continue to talk. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about process or, again, generally kind of where we are in our.
You have 9 finalized, correct?
Correct, yes, sir.
And then there's about 10 that are outstanding.
Correct.
Still there, and one that you can't contact.
One guy that we're having trouble
What's the
finding.
option on that? I mean, like if it's an out-of-state
Well,
owner.
we pretty much exhaust everything. The next step is me go knock on the door. This is a rental property. So we're trying to find the owner of the rental property.
And the tenant doesn't know.
Haven't talked to the tenant. We don't like generally to get the tenants involved if we don't have to. We're just taking a real small strip off the front of a large parcel.
Are the other 9 favorable? Are you folks? Yeah, I'm just curious. to know.
Nobody, I shouldn't say nobody. Most everyone is in favor of the project. You know, there are some more vigorous about squeezing every last nickel out than others. And, you know, again, everybody's got questions about what's happening, so we try to respond to that. So I would expect most of the remainder will get signed. It's hard to predict, but, you know, we've got tentative agreements with some of those folks that we're not, you know, papering up right now. And again, deep in discussions with the remainder of them.
Right. I think the reason I'm asking this is because sometimes it's a pretty hard decision, you know, when that word eminent, or those 2 words, eminent domain come up, it's something that sometimes you just want to kind of walk away from and say, I don't want to be involved in this.
Yeah, no question. Been doing this an awful long time. Taking anybody through the eminent domain process is not something we set out to do or like doing. But as you can imagine, there's a myriad of circumstances that can prevent us from, you know, reaching a reasonable.
Right. Understood. That's the questions that I had. Just that it's an uncomfortable vote to sometimes when you say, I'm taking your property. What are you going to do?
Yeah, understand. And again, I would just reiterate that, you know, approving either the ordinance or filing of the petition, we always continue to talk unless, again, a landowner just says, don't call me anymore. So.
And then the option is just, you're going to do it because
Sometimes, yeah.
19 people want it, you don't, so.
Yeah.
You kind of do it short. Okay, that's what I want. Thank you.
I would just note a couple of things. So number one, you know, some people have had questions, technical questions, right, about, hey, I didn't see anything here about a gate, or I didn't, you know, what about this? So we've had Mr. Orrick and the engineers have met property owners on their property to talk about grading and trees and what, those technical pieces out. So there's been quite a bit of communication. Now, sometimes you're working on 2 or 3 and then you go to the next 2 or 3,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Well, you
The
remember,
second thing,
I can remember that from 110th Street. I remember it from Kansas Avenue. I remember it from north 110th Street, and just something that I guess you just take it a bite at a time.
and I would note, never say never, but in my 15 years here, we've done a number of these projects. We probably filed 3 times that I can think of when we actually did a filing. 2 of those were settled before they got down the road at all. We've only had 1 that went completely through the eminent domain process. And at the end of the day, they're independent appraisers that do that process. They effectively came back and said the appraisal that was done by the appraiser, which I believe is the same one we've used on this one, their value was fair and correct, and the court ordered us to pay. And that's only happened 1 time out of every major project we've had. that we've had that issue. We always expect that we will resolve this action ultimately, but timing and process is important in doing these, especially with KDOT. They want us to say, you've got this done and this done and this done and this done. Part of that process.
And I would echo what Mike said, and I would also add that meeting with the landowners and with the engineers, oftentimes, and has already on this project, resulted in tweaking the plans a little bit to recognize what a landowner's concern might be. I mean, nobody knows their own property like the property owner. And so that process, again, does result in, some positive things for the design. And, Mike in particular, not every city's like this, but open-minded about, potentially tweaking the plans in a way that makes sense. So.
I think most of our council, if not all of our council, really likes to avoid eminent domain if at all possible. Really strong in protecting property rights and homeowners' rights. It's a little concerning to me that almost or over half of these haven't been resolved. It seems like usually when we get to this vote, there's only 1 or 2 stragglers because we haven't been able to reach them. I wonder if we might be jumping the gun just a little bit, if we need a little more time to try to resolve, since we're only at 50% of the cases that are ready to go. Do you feel like a little bit more time would help you?
Again, Mike and I have talked about, when to file, and we're planning another 30 days of negotiating anyway. Again, without wanting to get into negotiations and tactics and whatnot, it doesn't hurt the process to have the city being seen as moving forward. I'll be as honest as I can be. Every one of the ones that aren't resolved is about money. So it's not always for lack of effort, on the city's part. There's, again, rules, appraisals that we have to do, submit written offers, engage with negotiations, entertain their, feedback, et cetera, et cetera. But I certainly respect that nobody likes having to exercise eminent domain. It's just.
Well, and especially if are these 10 different property owners? Because if I remember, maybe some of the parcels.
One of them has 2 separate parcels. So it would be 10 remaining parcels with 9 owners. If that makes sense.
So I guess that's aside from just the eminent domain itself, it's concerning to me that half of the people are not on board with it. pushing that many properties through the process. And that's what I got an email today, and we won't go into any specifics or mention that, but he's said that he didn't feel like he had time to ask questions or get answers and things like that. And I know that you guys have been working diligently and trying to communicate with folks. And so I don't know what the communication barrier might be, but I was just wondering if that timeline, if we needed another week or two to try to bring some of those folks to a resolution, so we're not at like 50%. I feel like that's a pretty big gap.
I think that's probably, I mean, that's kind of a,
Pretty typical.
I mean, I think that's I think it's kind of a council discussion, probably more than from our, some cities, and I know Tim has worked with them. Some cities start the process by passing the resolution, 2 weeks later, pass the ordinance, and then start negotiating. I think we've always taken a position different than that. Let's start with the negotiation, even though it's the first resolution says we'll go out and get a survey of the property that you need. Well, we've done that a year ago, right? I mean,
Sure.
I mean, in order to design a project, you gotta kind of know what you gotta need. That tweaks a little bit, but I mean, we kind of know that. So, different cities just use a different approach. And some feel like having that done at the very front end is the best mechanism. I think we have generally taken a position of saying, start with negotiations, then do the resolutions. And generally from the time of the resolution, we generally been at least 30 days past the resolution. And then, in this case, we're, roughly, we're 3 months past that time.
So we've been trying to communicate potentially for 3 months.
Oh, yeah.
Would that be accurate?
Yeah. Oh, we've had offers out on the table since February.
And did folks have notice of our meeting tonight to know that we would be discussing it?
And not a separate notice, no.
Just on the agenda, so it wouldn't be like a notice that goes out to properties involved.
I mean, I don't know if we normally would do a separate notice or a new notice on that.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, that's not typically done.
Mike, for a January bid letting, what needs to happen between now and then?
Obviously, we have to have property acquired, and we have to have the utilities relocated. And that's really what happens. The utility relocation process is 4 to 6 months.
Right, that's what drug us down.
That's what happened last one.
Right.
A little bit. I mean, we got delayed, and then one of the utilities there failed to do what they're supposed to do. But yeah, that's one of the reasons that you need the right of way earlier.
Right.
Is so that you can get in and have utilities. That's the biggest one. And some of them are ready to go, but they can't move forward until obviously we have acquisitions. And again, we have to notice, KDOT has 1309. Give to them about when will the utilities be relocated, et cetera. And they won't schedule it for bidding until we have some pieces. So
Right.
it would be impossible. I would say impossible. I would say impossible for this project to bid in late this year, right? Just because it could bid as early as October, but we're just not close enough. From my, primarily right of way and utility bill.
I would
Again,
think,
most of these are, and I'll have to say, I mean, some of these they may be drainage easements. Most of them have temporary construction easements. We're not technically taking any property, we're regrading the property, sodding it, et cetera. So we're not taking property, but we're using the property, and that's still part of this acquisition process. Most of the right of way, is 10 to 20 feet. For the most part on the property on either side. So we have a lot more in the temporary construction easement. We've got a couple of large drainage easements down by Kansas and Kansas and 98th Street, you know, there's a pretty big drainage area down there, right? So we have to have drainage easements, you know, for those extensions of those types of structures. The water's already there, or, you know, we're not changing the water, it's already there.
You know, since this subject came up over a year ago, I'm sure Councilman Seitz was adamant in favor of this. And I've driven that road a lot since then, and I can see the concerns with that. And I think that if you've got 9 in favor right now, one that's out of town or whatever, I think that if we pass this ordinance, it could get the ball rolling pretty good on it. So I'd like to make the motion to pass ordinance number 1056.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
Yes.
Malott,
Yes.
Shriver.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Thank you.
Again, I will note, right, that we will not be filing this case in the next week. I mean, we'll keep you informed of how we're coming along on those. Again, I think in my discussions with Tim, we probably have 2 or 3 that are right at the cusp. And we meet once a week, every week. Now, you know, early on, we weren't doing that just because, I mean, stuff gets out, but we're meeting every week to say, okay, where are we at on this one? What do we need to do? You know, is it a dollar issue? Is it a, you know?
And
hey,
if
we
folks
forgot
reach
about
out
the gate
to
or
us
something.
on the council,
Right.
saying, hey, we need to communicate about this, and I know we're not negotiating on behalf
Right,
of the
yes,
city,
yes.
what should we have them do? Should we have them call you?
They really should direct their conversations with Tim.
Okay.
Now, like we have one where we are, you know, the property owner has asked that the city be present for a conversation. So I will be on that call with them because we're, and the legal people, I mean, we're basically legally represented, and sometimes property owners are. Right? So some property owners may have an attorney, and then they call and they want to have a discussion. And that gets to be inappropriate. I don't know what legal rights they're right, but if they have legal representation, then it has to stay the attorney to determine. Give them a call and say, what about this? And they may maybe, but we can't then have one-on-one conversation outside that attorney.
Okay, so would you just send us the information so that if
Sure.
someone contacts us, we can just say,
Absolutely.
go ahead and call the
Right.
attorney. And then just, we'll move on here in just a
Sure.
second, but
All
just
right,
in
just wanna let
future,
you know.
for policy, I think it would be just neighborly of us to not do the minimum, but if someone's personal property is coming up for eminent domain, let's go the extra mile and send them a notice and say, hey, we're discussing your property tonight, so they have a chance to be heard by the council as well.
Okay.
All right, moving on to item number 4 here, staff presentation regarding mill levy implications for the revenue neutral rate, and consider resolution 2022-10 regarding the same.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This edition of our budget development kind of series over the summer and into the fall is going to focus more on process and procedure as detailed by the state legislation versus going over specific expenditure or estimated revenues. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the revenue neutral rate and development of it for the 2023 budget. So just a recap as to what the revenue neutral rate, or the R&R, is. This will be the second budget year that we've had it to contend with as part of the budget process. In 2021, SB 13 and HB 2104 established a new process which affected that set the process for the cities to set their mill rate, effective for last year's budget. That established the revenue neutral rate. It replaced the old tax lid, if you remember. The tax lid was targeted more at actual dollars, property tax dollars raised by municipalities, whereas the R&R is more concerned with the mill levy itself. It's essentially the tax rate. So that leads to the question of who calculates the R&R. Wyandotte County Clerk develops the R&R using a formula and a process developed by the state. And through those two entities, they assign us being the cities, the revenue neutral rate. So the system is such that the state has developed the process for the county to administer to dictate the decision-making of all the cities in Kansas using this one blanket formula, kind of one-size-fit-all model to determine the revenue neutral rate. As you can imagine, there are several issues with that broad blanket approach that the state has taken to enact the revenue neutral rate. So for our purposes, the fiscal year 2022 versus the fiscal year 2023 valuation went up about 9.6%. So again, the city doesn't have any real role in the valuation process. That's all done at the county level. They noticed the city in the summer. We just got our valuation notice shortly after our last council meeting. So this is the first year seeing it, a 9.6% increase with an R&R of 38.7 mils thereabouts, or a reduction of 3.6 mils to be revenue neutral, to net the same amount of property tax revenue as was netted in last year's budget. So again, there are broad issues with the R&R and that formula, and then there are issues specific to Edwardsville and our revenue model and some of the economic development incentive that this council and previous councils had in place for a number of years. To summarize some of these issues, the calculations on which the data is presented make some incorrect assumptions about property tax collections in the cities. We don't assume 100% collection, things like that. I mean, that's been part of the budget process that we've had to kind of wrestle with the state forms for a long time. There's no real consideration for changes in inflation or the consumer price index. Obviously, inflation is quite higher than what it was whenever the R&R process was developed in 2021. I'm not sure how anyone could have predicted the inflation to be reaching the point that it is now whenever the state legislature went into effect. I mean, I was no big fan of the tax lid in the first place, but that is one thing I could say about the tax lid, that it did have some accommodations for the CPI and just the general cost of goods. That was essentially stripped away in the R&R legislation, and there's no real variable that addresses that. Starting next year, the costs for noticing citizens about hearings related to the R&R are to be borne entirely by the taxing entities who are exceeding their R&R, or at least putting out the public hearing to consider exceeding the R&R. So this is essentially an unfunded state mandate that they are telling us, this is a step that you need to do in order to remain in compliance with state laws regarding budget development, but we're not going to be compensating you for the requirements that we're telling you that you need to do. This is the last year so the way it worked last year and the way it's going to work this year is that the county will pay for all the notices, the postage, getting it out there and developing the actual notice that goes out, and the state will reimburse. Starting next year, that goes away, and that cost will need to be borne by the taxing entities. There's no consideration. This is the biggest kind of local issue that we have with it. There's really no consideration for existing industrial revenue bonds, and which we'll kind of dive into a little bit more in detail in the next couple slides. But here in Edwardsville, IRBs have been a essential economic development tool that this council and previous councils have used to populate the industrial park, which gets companies established here, multi-million-dollar facilities here, and the way that valuations are calculated, the value, the economic development value that those projects and IRB projects have is essentially done away with if we were to just accept the R&R model and apply it to each budget each and every year. And kind of on that same vein, it really penalizes new residential growth as well, because the way the notices are structured, there's not context presented to some of the different decisions the municipalities would make regarding their mill levy. So if your valuation goes up because you have a new housing development, there's not really any consideration for that in any of the notice or contextualization of that from the resident's point of view. It's just kind of lost in the ether of, taxes going up, or the perception that taxes are going up. So on the subject of IRBs, and most everybody on the council is familiar with them to some degree, but for the benefit of folks following along, so what IRBs are bonds issued by the local government on behalf of a private entity for specific industrial projects. It raises the capital for manufacturing and distribution facilities that will, again, establish themselves in a community for the long term, where at the end of their property tax abatement, we've got a multi-million-dollar facility kind of entrenched in the community. They're not really going anywhere after that. The whole purpose of IRBs is to provide that mechanism for the cities to attract those kind of businesses that traditionally stay in those places for long terms. Now, in the meantime, those companies, they do receive a tax abatement, but they also pay what's called a pilot payment, a payment in lieu of taxes that goes to all of the taxing entities, which they would normally be taxed at, the terms of which are kind of detailed in the resolutions and the different agreements leading up to the approval of the IRBs. So we've used that for ERP, for Fastenal, for Herff Jones, FedEx, and many others in the industrial park. So this year, Glazers is coming off their IRB and re-entering the tax roll, which is great because it's valued at $1.6 million in assessed valuation. But that $1.6 million is not taken into account in the R&R calculation. It's counted as property changed in use, because for a long time it was under tax abatement. So for the last 10 years, it's been operating in the city as it has now. Nothing's changed about its use. It's just now it's on the tax rolls rather than being on tax abatement. 2027, if the R&R formula is still in place, budget year 2027, I should say, that will have a considerable effect on the assessed valuation, because I believe we've got at least 3, maybe 4 projects coming off of IRBs and onto the tax rolls, all in the industrial park. So that will artificially raise the assessed valuation with this changed in use, while not really taking into account what exactly it's changed. Why is this changing in use? So that's, if this formula stays in place for that amount of time, just putting it out there now, we've got these different residential projects as well that is going to change the assessed valuation within the city that we need to be kind of looking ahead and being aware of, so we can strategically develop our budgets with that in mind. So this kind of recaps that. IRBs are not included in the valuation data provided by the county. Total for this, and I said fiscal year 2022, I meant fiscal year 2023. But total for next year's budget, the property changes use 1.8, almost $1.9 million. 1.6 of that is Glazers. We'll get into some of the other changes a little bit later on. So even if I were to just account for that change and kind of rework the R&R formula as the state has developed it, accounting for the non-change in use of the Glazers property, then our valuation has only increased 7.6%, and an R&R rate would be about 2.9 mils less. However, that also doesn't account for the loss of payment in lieu of taxes, which is, I think in Glazers' case, it's kind of a floating number because it depends on the other mill levies in the taxing jurisdictions of a certain company. So it kind of bounces around a little bit, but between that $10,000 to $20,000 that they're given to the city. So the other properties change in use as it relates to next year's budget. We've got 5 parcels outside of, there's a big list of parcels, but specifically there are 5 that are either new residential houses or they are reclassified for residential use. And specifically, that's the Groves housing development that this council has been discussing for the last number of months. So that specific parcel, its assessed valuation went up about $50,000 prior to the rezoning, prior to any dirt moving around. It just went from ag to residential. So that one changes its tax rate to the degree where it's adding $50,000 in changed use when nothing's changed about that property and nothing's going to change about that property. Well, I should say until construction starts going on it. But until that point, the property is not changed in use. So again, we're kind of being penalized, and we're not unique to this. Cities are kind of being penalized for encouraging growth within the community because we've got this artificial formula that the state has kind of shackled us to that dictates what they think our revenue neutral rate is as it relates to property taxes. I think, in my opinion, I think in a lot of local government's opinions, we're the ones closest to our residents' needs and the kind of projects that we want to do and the kind of property tax relief that we are comfortable in offering. And I'd rather keep those decisions as local as we can rather than adhere to a state process that's administered by the county to the individual cities. So looking at average home prices in Edwardsville, so this was just, I'm getting a little bit more concrete data from working with the appraisers on what that average home price is, but just a quick search of the area using some of those just general realtor sites. I'm seeing, and some of the folks on the dais probably have some details about this too, average home prices in Edwardsville around $266,000. So in that case, for a home price, an average of $266,000, what this chart shows is their annual property tax and their property tax broken up into months. If we were to use the fiscal year 2021 mill levy, essentially 1 mil higher than what it is now, all the way down to the R&R that was delivered to us through the state notification. So all in all, a difference of about $140 a year and a little less than $12 per month. From the top end, if we were to, if a decision was made to raise the mill levy by 1 mil or lower the mill levy by 3.6 mils, the actual change to the average homeowner in Edwardsville is going to be about $12 a month. That's the swing there. But for the city, the difference is about $314,000 from the top end to the bottom end. So even if we kept on that second row, the current mill levy, it's a difference of about, let's see, $250,000. So pretty large swing in the revenue that could be netted by the city, even if we were just to hold the mill levy steady versus just accepting the R&R as it's been presented to us. So again, these are the policy decisions that we're wrestling with throughout the whole budget process. Is what are the priorities that we want to do, and has been kind of detailed in some of the earlier budget discussions and our workshops and what we're hearing from the residents. We've had a conversation last meeting about some roads that need some work. Those are the kind of projects that you obviously need revenue to do these projects. So again, we're trying to thread that needle of what's the appropriate amount of tax relief that we want to be able to offer versus being able to responsibly count on the revenues that we need to get some of these necessary projects and kind of long gestating projects in the works and keep them moving forward. So the next steps and kind of where we're at now. So if the governing body decides to do nothing and hold to the R&R, then no action is needed. Then the R&R will just be assigned to us, and that will be the mill levy for the fiscal year 2023, the mill levy that was developed by a state formula administered by the county. Now, if the governing body decides to consider exceeding the R&R, then we must notify the county clerk no later than July 20th. So we've got this meeting, we've got July 11th as the last two meetings that we can make an action that we would notify the public that we're going to have a public hearing to discuss the possible raising or exceeding of the R&R, I should say. At that point, the county clerk will send notices to the taxpayers, again, on their dime to be reimbursed by the state. Next year, that'll be on our dime. And it also includes, I put an asterisk there, it includes a lot of different data points as it relates to what the exceeded mill levy rate is compared to the R&R rate. So what's the percentage increase? What's it affect on your individual property? One versus the other, that kind of thing. So there's kind of a laundry list of things that the county needs to include in that notice. Again, none of those data points are, the city also has $1.6 million in properties coming out of tax abatement that have been here for 10 years, new residential properties, which have raised the assessed valuation there. So again, just not a lot of context provided in those notices. Whereas a public hearing would at least give us the ability to contextualize some of those increases if the questions were to arise. So what's prepared in your packet is Resolution 2022-10, which what essentially would do is set the maximum mill levy that we could do, which the way that the resolution is developed right now, if we want to notify the county that we want to consider exceeding the revenue neutral rate, we have to give them an alternative rate, and that's essentially our not to exceed rate. So what's in the resolution as it stands right now is that we would notify the county that we intend on having a public hearing to consider exceeding the R&R at a rate not to exceed 42 or 43.2, I believe is the, Yes, 43.3, yes, so which is essentially the tax rate from fiscal year 2021. So, in essentially a 1 mil increase of what it is now, which would give us a kind of scale from which to work within. It does not guarantee or obligate us to do anything other than have this public hearing to consider exceeding the R&R. It's notifying the county that this is we want to have the hearing. The max we would consider raising it to is at 43.3. That sets the max. That's not the assigned mill levy that we're moving forward with. All that does is set the goalpost that we will not go higher than this, and ostensibly we would not go lower than the true R&R that I developed, which is a little bit less than the actual R&R. So that's what the resolution accomplishes. It does not obligate us to any specific course of action outside of just holding the hearing. If you have specific questions about that, I'm here to answer those. Kind of the way that the rest of and you've seen this timeline before, July 11th, we're going to focus on general fund expenditure levels after we have some further discussions with the department. So we'll be presenting that to you at the next meeting, followed by a kind of mid-year budget report for fiscal year 2022 to update some of our estimates that we gave you earlier in the year. August 22nd, we'd be setting the public hearing for the maximum budget and set the public hearing in the have the public hearing set for the R&R at that point, if that's a decision that's come to tonight, and then have all of our public hearings and final adoption on that September 12th date.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we adopt resolution 2020-10, a resolution of the city of Edwardsville, Kansas regarding the governing body's intent to levy a property tax exceeding the revenue neutral rate.
Second. It was 2022-10.
Okay,
You said 2020.
okay, 2022-10, thank you.
And was that Commissioner or Councilman Bishop with the second? Yeah. Yes.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes,
Thank you. Mike, did we still have number 5?
Yeah, I believe we should. I want to say 7:05. I mean,
this is-
I think it might take us 20 minutes to discuss. So I think we've had some actions on this that may require coming out of executive session for action.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion, we recess into executive session pursuant to KSA 754319B6 for preliminary discussion on acquisition of real property to return at 7:05.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I just did that.
This conference will now be recorded.
Move to return to regular session.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Moment. Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes. And there will be no formal action necessary.
All right, item number 6, city manager report. Mike, do you have anything for us today?
I think you mainly have there, as the mayor know, we somewhat of a short time frame, but we did submit a number of grants to the county ARPA programs. It was a little challenging because you either had to be a not-for-profit or a UG department. We're not really either, but we figured out a way to get those submitted in there. I think we submitted in excess of $3 million worth of projects, so kind of across the spectrum from generators for our public facilities. You know, so we have outages to quite a bit around mobility, being sidewalks, crosswalks, accesses. Again, trying to take that K32 4th Street connection. We can do that, support for our youth in the community, how we can get them to internet accesses, and STEM research things and stuff, so they have a way to access that here locally versus trying to go somewhere else. And improvements through our into the law enforcement world, mainly around officer safety issues, everything from how we have to deal with things like fentanyl and some of those very dangerous drugs, you know, for contamination purposes, and just broader officer safety. So that's kind of where we're focused on our energies, have those happen. Address any others if specific. So other than that, I don't have anything else. Zach.
Zach, you don't? Okay, Ms. Dion? Chief Matthews?
The only thing I would add, in addition to the report that provided, what we have attended a couple of meetings that I think are kind of the future. It certainly brings some hope in the sense of relationships with the UG, whatever that might mean, mainly in the law enforcement realm. We attended the 911 Advisory Committee meeting. It's the first of its kind for Wyandotte County. Fairly standard in other places. And I think there was some good benefit from that, of learning how the dispatch center is being run, what their challenges are. Some of we knew, but we know the faces and the names somewhat. And that's going to be a twice a year meeting. City managers and at all three cities are involved in that as well. Fire chief. That was a good kind of catalyst to the next meeting. We were invited to the chief's law enforcement meeting with the mayor. Downtown today, with the purpose of just kind of starting some dialogue about sharing of resources and kind of, you know, segmentation that's historic between the communities and how things work. Try to break down chisel away little pieces of that, and I think it was very beneficial in a lot of ways. If nothing else, we got a voice at the table, a table that didn't exist before, so it wasn't, you can complain all you wanted, but now we're at the ninth floor, if you will, and I think that's a good thing. That won't be always that way. The chiefs have met in the past, but more informal. We're going to start something a little more formal on a monthly basis. There's a lot of change going on downtown that we may benefit from. We're hoping to be a part of, and there's some pretty innovative stuff that I'm really happy to be, at least have a voice about, and things like that. You may have heard the UG, there's a proposal from Matt May, our emergency management director, about a radio system upgrade for our portable radios and things like that. It's been a topic of discussion, how to fund it. It's very expensive. They have a plan for that, but we really previously, though we were in place, we didn't have much of a voice when they did that previously. And this time, Bonner Springs Chief and I, we both want to be a part of having a pretty firm, at least be at the table again and have a voice there. So I think there's some really momentum. Things are changing again. I think we saw that with the CAD piece, right? Where before it was absolutely, we had to do it like this. We don't have that kind of attitude anymore. And we, you know, there's some training opportunities that we were kind of, you know, maybe didn't know about, maybe wanted to. Those things are changing, and those positive from both of those meetings just in the last week. I hope to have better news as we go along.
It's encouraging. Chief Whittem?
Two follow-ups. One, we have conveyed two offers. They paramedic spots. One to the firm, the other is waiting to get back with us. And then I'll remind everybody that Christmas in July is actually starting on the 30th. June this year was Thursday night. Yeah, Thursday here. Just to remind everybody that the donations and employees that are collected go through and they are distributed to our mayor tree lighting ceremony. The ho-ho express and all that around Christmas.
Well, those donations, like cash donations, will they flow through the new community fund that we have? Okay. Okay.
It's separate from
Okay,
It could, but I mean, they already have that. set up,
Right.
But I mean, if I might add, just around public works and just staffing, at IT. So we have filled the position, in the back, Sean Paul Friedman. Prior. I'm bad about last names. She's doing great. If you walk back there, she's already got all her space organized. She's gonna be a great asset. I have no doubt. The first thing is, she says, now if I come in your office and clean everything off and organize everything, what do you think? And I think I said, well, I'll probably need a glass of wine and some medication, because I'll be frantic, because I won't know anything. But that's a great addition. We're still working on Public Works Director, and I expect we will be making an offer for our other vacant maintenance position tomorrow. I actually met with the individual this evening before our meeting, so that will give Public Works kind of in a place where they can do more work out.
That'd be like from 2 to 3.
Public Works.
That'd be like from 2 to 3.
Yes. We'll have our supervisor, which does wastewater, and then our two maintenance workers. They've been doing it. We had the pipe failure they worked on, and then we've been doing our sewer system study, and so we're hopefully getting that wrapped up. And then we will be doing our road project here.
Councilman Adams?
Chief Whitteman, or I'm sorry, Mathis, regarding meeting with the county and the other cities and so forth, I really commend you for that. I think anytime our mayor, our department heads or anything can meet with people and at the county, the UG level, we need to keep Edwardsville in front of, and we cannot get anything we don't ask for. And we can't get representation if we're not represented. So I think it's really important that anybody has the opportunity to meet with anybody at the UG level. It ought to be taken and really have a long view of the benefits for the city of Edwardsville and the residents. So thank you. Really appreciate that. The most startling thing from the R&R deal was that Glaziers has been here 10 years. Oh my God. Seems like just yesterday that we were talking about them coming in, taking that building and making some good use out of the building. Regarding the R&R, I would like to express my real dissatisfaction with our conservative Kansas legislature passing down this kind of nonsense to the cities that I'm sure they love it when the feds pass it down to them. Unfunded mandates and limits on what they can do and dictating how they can serve their state. I really don't appreciate this R&R, and it's even more annoying this year than it was last year. And so I think we ought to take every opportunity we can to let our legislators know that we just don't appreciate it at all. And they should keep their business in Topeka, which they're not doing such a great job of anyway. So enough of the ranting. But the R&R is ridiculous. Trust the local people and the local residents and local governments. Regarding our mill levy, I would really like for us to consider maybe staying the same, because there's a lot of things that need done. We have a lot of people giving us feedback. There's obviously the roads are the main kind of issue, but there's a lot of other things that need attention. One is I think there are some areas of parks that can be improved, that we can use some of that money for. We need to keep in mind that we have employees that need to be served well. And obviously, in order to keep good people, you've got to keep good people. And there's some ways that you do that. And it takes money and time. So the last thing is in regards to the Richland Avenue and the Kansas Avenue, I've been bantering this around in my mind for, probably about a year or so, but I think it would be great for us to get a rough estimate on what it would take to put those roads the way we want them. And then when we're issuing bonds for the city hall, the public work, our public safety building, is that we add on that onto the bond issue and take care of those two roads, get them done right, because it's not going to be done right out of the city budget. It's a major capital expense. And I think that we should get some rough estimates on what it would be and the needs for that, and add it to our city hall and keep that project moving forward, because it's an absolute necessary. I think we all agreed on that in our workshop that we had, that we waited long enough. We've cost ourselves enough money with the increase in building expenses, with the increase in tax or interest rates now. It's time to get off the pot and do something.
Mr. Adams, Council, I'll just let you know that I did meet with our engineer, our city engineer, and asked, and we'll do the same thing on Richland, but we kind of spent a little time on Kansas and 110th Street to just put together for us, just kind of, hey, if we laid over a 24-foot on that section, a 24-foot, open ditch road section, and just kind of lay that over the existing, what's out there on the ground, right? So what would that look like? And, what are the spots where we would have, we'd have to deal with something, whatever that may be, relocation, children, just kind of, at this point, just kind of an overlay and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. We can bring that back to the council and say, what do you think of this? And then we could, build some cost estimates around that. So that we can do the same thing with Richland and 100, I think that's 106th Street. Just say, okay, well, if we did this one like this, whatever that may be, what do we see there? What are those? Is this concept what you want to see from a road, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways to build a road. We know how to deal with the technical pieces, but is this kind of visually what we want to see the road be? By width, or sidewalks, no sidewalks, curbs, no curbs, right? Those kind of pieces, we kind of just lay those over. I like option 2, and then we come back and say, okay, to do that, we think the cost of this and these are the things we need to do next to move that project along. So we kind of started on that, but we'll do the same for Richland 106. I mean, it's something we were looking at anyways, but kind of a half a step.
So also I think all of us received communication from a citizen, from David Strait, on the sidewalk and getting kids safely to school. And I'd at least like for us to take a look at that and see, because I think it is important that we keep safety at the top of our list. That might be something we can do well within a budgetary process. I think so. I'll take a breath.
I would like to echo Mr. Adams on the R&R state. Anyway, I won't say any more about that. But hey, Mike, is there a way we can get, when you put up a sign for a public hearing or a piece of property, can we just get an email about that? Saying, hey, this piece of property is, coming up, because it would save me a phone call to Zach or somebody else, because he's already got enough to do.
Okay. Yeah. I can get Bradley to, our planner to put a distribution together, and when we put those, if we send letters and those go out at the same time, there's there's a time frame in which we have to put those out, et cetera. But yeah, we could put together an email distribution. I'll talk to him tomorrow about that. That's a good idea.
Hey, I got one question. What about the regatta that's going to be going on out in the river now? Is that on that? How are we going to keep them safe in the water? I mean, are we going to rely on mutual aid from KCK with the boats or something like that? Or are we going to do that on our own? I mean, I think if it's going to happen.
I'm not up to date on it.
Well, for the regatta, so that's not been couched as a recurring event. Now they're kind of looking at different ways where they can utilize our boat ramp, and we're kind of engaged in some discussions about some possible infrastructure additions and improvements to that riverfront area. specific to the regatta activity and kind of done in conjunction with the other larger riverfront park redevelopment. But all their request was essentially just the presence of EMS there at the time for the race that actually took place. And I'm not sure what other requirements that they would want us to fulfill.
When we were doing them, they were doing them in the call, and I was working, we had a boat in the water, you know, with, not a, lack of a better word, a rescue diver,
Mm-hmm.
in case something happened, because it is a river.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not a lake. I mean, it's got currents. And I know the call is not very deep, but I don't want to get us caught shorthanded, you know, and have to, after something happens, then we got to call KCK, and then they got to get all their junk and get down here. You know, maybe look at some way we can support that maybe a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. They seem pretty excited about the possibility of having kind of a regular event at that location. So I assume, and the first one that they had was pretty modest in scale because it was the first one they had at this location. I believe there was only 6 teams there. So it wasn't one of the larger regattas that have been there. So I think Deputy Chief Morrow might be able to comment a little bit more on our capacity to respond during the day of, but that'll definitely, if they want to grow there, then that is definitely going to be a piece of that conversation.
I think if they're going to grow, we should grow with them and get all the safety things that we can do for them.
We've been having some conversations with that group who held the regatta. I take it back. It wasn't the group who held the regatta, but was one of the teams who participated in the regatta, a local team who right now is based out of Wyandotte County Lake, and they had kind of migrated over to our area because of the algae issue that was going on in Wyandotte County Lake. And from there, they're like, we actually kind of like this a lot better. So we've been having some conversations with them at the CPPS board level about different ideas about how to kind of encourage that activity, which would, you know, be a kind of infrastructure addition to the park that would, you know, add to its, you know, versatility of what you can do out there. And then B, also kind of open up express some interest in participating in the recreation side of it and having a, you know, teaching rowing courses through the Edwardsville Parks and Rec system, but utilizing their, you know, their team infrastructure as part of that. So we're pretty excited to kind of keep picking at that and see how it develops. But part of that will be, to your point, making sure everything's safe. Yeah.
You know, we could even express to them, hey, if you're going to do this, we will, you know, put our money into it for the safety aspect of it or something, you know, because it does draw sometimes a pretty good crowd too. If there was a place to observe it down there, it'd be a nice place for it. And I got one more thing. Hey, when we're talking about Kansas Avenue, can we put a couple speed humps in there? Because them people fly down there. I'm told you could sit in my driveway, dude, on the weekends. We wouldn't even have to have sales tax because the people coming in from there, they come down that street 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. I'm not kidding.
It'll happen.
And you can't, they don't like it when you throw stuff. No, but I mean, it's that bad on when Hollis Center's having something sometimes. I mean, it's, you know, because it's kind of a blind hill right there at my house, you know, right down. Yeah, almost a lot of near misses. Anyway, most of the neighbors would approve of speed humps, I believe. All right, I'm done.
All right, Councilman Malat.
Not much. Zach, I was curious about the county computer system. Are we cool on that? Is it going to be giving us accurate information? I've heard a lot of stories about.
I think it depends on, I'm probably the wrong person to comment on how accurate some of the stuff they're getting to us is. Now in a lot of areas they have been, like I mentioned, there was a lag in our gaming revenue distribution a couple months back, which has been rectified, and that's kind of in line with the normal rate that revenue item performs at. There are a few areas, you know, I'd call them relatively minor that where their computer system is still kind of trying to get caught up. Off the top of my head specifically, I'm thinking of they'll send us a bill for jail stays, and we kind of utilize some of their data to verify who was staying there and for how long. And I know some of that data has not been updated or been fixed since their data breach. So I think by and large they. Oh, sure.
I don't, the jail stuff.
I'm not as concerned about that area because a lot of that is based on information that's been out there. So they're basing it on their final appraisal that they gave us last October. So that's just really a matter of math than it is available data. Now, I mean, I guess possibly there could be some issue with the way their data is calculated from calculating the total assessed valuation, but I don't have a lot of concern about that. It doesn't seem like that's been
I
affected.
just didn't know if we needed to be concerned with that. Was it 3 or 4 years ago that they missed something down there that was?
I will say one thing from that time, we had a couple of those. So one change, I really think it got added legislatively, and I would say partially because we complained about it, is now when we get our assessed values, they have an area for values under protest. And so that gives us an indication if there's always some values under protest, right? And they always assume that that's 100% when we know it's never 100%. So if I say my house is, they say it's worth 250 and I say it's worth 220, well, they show the whole 250 under protest. So we know that, we look for the big numbers. The other thing is the appraiser and the treasurer's office really has done a better job keeping us in the loop, even when they are going to court, even though we're not a party. And so if somebody challenges an appraisal, we're not a party to that, but they keep us engaged. I would say Matt Willard, who's the chief appraiser now, really has been good to work with over the years. They did just now get their appraisal, the public part of the appraisal system back up in the last week, which is very helpful. We use it a lot for just looking at things and where properties are at, things like that. So,
But the reason I was asking, I just wanted to know what kind of relevance that had with Councilman Adams mentioned the revenue neutral being so far against it, and the mill levy that we have right now, that we want to maintain that, or even possibly looking, maybe raising it somewhat. And I just wanted to make sure that the numbers were going to match up, to where we were really accurate, because it's like I said about the eminent domain, it's a hard thing to sit here and say, we're going to have to raise the mill in order to provide what people are wanting. And that's why I want to make sure that the numbers that we're getting are accurate.
I think from that standpoint, we're getting valid, accurate information to make this.
But you do hear some horror stories from the public.
The bigger, again, just on the R&R, the biggest issue is it's looking at the revenue side, but as you all know, what do we adopt? We adopt the expenditure side, right? They've disconnected. There's no linkage between what it costs. So even if I have a new housing addition come in, right, I've got more roads to plow, right? I'm gonna have more police calls. I'm gonna have more fire calls. It goes with growth, which is not bad, but it never captures any of that. It only captures the value that they bring to the table and not the offset. Same with the IRBs. You got a piece of property that's paying a couple $100 in taxes. Now you give them a tax abatement, but now they're paying in pilots a couple $100,000. That's obviously a plus, but none of that gets captured in that process. So we could beat that up all night. But for accuracy of the numbers and the calculations around the R&R, the last number of years, the values that they provided us in June or July, it's moved up a little bit to what we get in November, which is the final appraisal, have been pretty much right on. Last year was exactly the same. I think the year before it was a small marginal difference. So we're not getting those swings where, oops, we put something on there twice or we totally forgot it, and we have several $1 million of assessed values that aren't being caught. I think that issue has been, resolved. Not that it couldn't happen again, but we also look at that very closely. We look at every property. We know every time we see a change in use, we're calling and we've got a list. And why is it changing? What did it change from? So we have that.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted. Also, has there been any kind of movement, discussion, progress, or anything on city facilities, on the new city facility? Any discussions anywhere?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I think one of the items is to come back with y'all to kind of upgrade or update the, you remember a number of years ago, we went through and said, well, what if our values did, this, or this, where were we at? What do we see, things coming off the tax rate? Obviously, now we have the R&R that kind of changed that thing to kind of show you what type of, where could we be at without, adversely impacting? We talked about, our debt to assessed value ratio, and we're, 8% probably now, 7 or 8% the new value. So from that ratio, we're in great shape. I think I'll come back and show you what I think. If we project out a 20-year bond issue, it's different levels. What do we think those might be? And maybe help give some guidance as to how much is available. Where do we want that? I mean, we can't totally dictate the price, right? I mean, but if we have an idea, hey, we can be in this range, or we can issue, $5 million of debt every third year. What does that look like? And so I'll put that together and bring that back. Should be able to do that probably next meeting.
Yeah, I think we should really get serious about the facility aspect of this, especially now that 4th Street is in the shape it is, which is, I'm pretty happy about that. I think everybody's really pretty happy about having that street open back up. But I think we need to concentrate on facilities for our city and our employees. I think that's a priority matter right now. There's a road, side of the road broke off up on Riverview. You probably know where it is, by the church on the south side. It's a pretty good little chunk that's knocked off the side. It's just a little bit east of the Mission Creek Church.
So what is?
The side of the road broke down. And
Okay.
I had oncoming traffic coming to me today and kind of had to take that hole. And there's a mailbox there too. So I thought I was going to leave them up.
This is
Riverview.
east of the curb and
East of
gutter
the church
section?
on Riverview.
Is it east of the curb and gutter section? Or is it
Yes.
just in the curb and
Yeah.
gutter?
Yeah, it's not part of the new construction.
That's why I needed to know that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I will take a look at it.
Well, I was busy watching the road in my rearview mirror, so.
South side.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Chuck, you know where it is. I bet you probably did it. And you probably have too.
2 days ago.
Well, I don't have hubcaps, or I wouldn't have. The other thing, 4th Street opening, I'm so happy. I'm just really happy about that, because that's been me that's been saying something about that every meeting. Thank you for closing the cemetery gates a week ago after your ball game, and thank you for getting the tree removed from up there. I was really pleased that seemed like that happened really pretty quick. And but that tree service could be used again if we ever need it. So,
Yep, I'll just give credit to Van Boeven Tree Service for
Army.
Van Boeven Tree Service. I'll give credit to them for being responsive, and they're local and they do some really good work. They think we'll probably have them back out soon to grind that stump, but the priority at the moment was just to get the giant limb out of there.
Because I was up there like at 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning, and it was there. And I went back at 7 o'clock that night and it was gone. And I thought that's pretty quick, because that was a pretty good sized street. That's all for me. Thank you.
Councilman Shriver?
Boy, if it talked so long, I forgot some of my stuff. Special sales tax, when is that sunset? 24?
Yeah, it's probably something we need to really here this year, start that process. And I think really the area that I think the two areas, number one, we had a really good working group on that. So we had local people that were helping to, so to speak, promote that and showing the value of it. Of course, we've been doing through the hot shot saying, this is how this money's being spent, right?
Right.
People
Could I
generally
say-
want to go,
Right.
how's my money being spent?
I was going to suggest maybe doing a highlight letter, a really good detailed,
Right,
and send it to everybody. Not everybody
Right.
sees the hot shot.
right.
Just
Yeah.
when the time comes, that way everybody sees it.
And I think why it went and changed the rate, I think we do look at, I think it's been very successful and Then should it be, do you just repeat exactly the same language or do we update? Because a lot's changed into, right? Do we allow it to be used for facilities as an example, part of the sales tax, where it currently it does? Do we include police in there, right? When we adopted it, we were just starting EMS. And if you recall, we didn't pay for the ambulances in that. So I think it also deserves a relook at the language of the sales tax.
Purpose.
I don't think you get totally changed, but I think it's still a special sales tax as a sunset. But, you know, it's been very effective, but some things we've done that we don't necessarily have to go back to. Radio system, some of these really high dollar items. And, you know, in other cities, you've seen this, they'll do a special sales tax for maybe a particular price, a swimming pool or a library or something. And when it ends, they adopt a new sales tax, then change the rate, but they have a new purpose. So I think we do need to look at the purpose of that sales tax as well. And I think that's why we need to be having those discussions probably in this year. So
We've been talking about it. I just wondered when it was.
because you always want to give yourself
Little room.
time on the election cycle.
Right.
So again, the election cycle now is August and November. Those are your options. Where before, you know, you could do more special. I guess you could still do a special election, but you really want to gear it around your election cycle, which is really August.
Expensive to do it one off.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Christmas in July toy drive, that's not the only time people can donate,
No,
correct?
June 30th is open for the whole month.
Right.
Now, we will take delivery throughout the year. We try to highlight the two specific time frames. We get it out there. One being kickoff in July, that they remind everybody what it does, what it goes for. And then when we give it out, you know, where it's come from, toy drive, Christmas, July. And then we go and get another emphasis on the first part of December.
Was this in the hot shot last week? Was it? I'm remiss. I didn't even, I skimmed right over it.
Zach has already had it out on
I wonder if was it in there, and I'm sorry, I skimmed right through it. What, did it explain in there that donations can be brought here? If somebody can't make this event and they want to give, can it give some direction as where that can go?
Yeah, we'll keep promoting. I think the last one in the Hasha was specifically promoting the June 30th event, but yeah, we'll continue to promote it. And we'll also have some flyers out over at the post office and at the Mobile Home Park as well. Just to get that out.
That leads to my next item, our marquee sign.
Yeah, it's figuring out the space.
I'm like Garrett in the 4th Street.
Yeah, I mean.
I think we need one. I know we need one. We have no other communication other than the hot shot and Facebook or our website.
Yeah. It's just where do we put it?
Honestly,
That's our-
right. And how many people don't see that? I mean, I think a lot of people maybe don't see that information. So I think we set some money aside for it too.
Yeah, we have money set aside. But it's, I mean, again.
Where is
it's
it gonna
not so much
go?
The cost of it, it's like, where do you put it? I mean, you know, we talked with the church, the problem is, if you try to put, you gotta put it so far north, you can't see it, or it's gonna block their sign. They, obviously, they don't want, you know, they've invested their sign. If you go over to the other side, again, the way the right of way is set up there, and the way the state, I mean, effectively, KDOT will not allow a digital sign in the right of way. They will allow some city signs if you go through the process, but they will not allow digital signs unless I can change it right now. And the best locations would be technically within the right of way. And so it's where do you put that sign? Do we rethink is 4th and K32 the place? Or do we look at other, you know, are we open to other potential locations?
Are we getting one sign or two?
Well, it was a double face sign, so the one option was it would be kind of a V sign. So the two faces, instead of back to back, would be kind of a V shape, if you want to think about. So you could angle the two faces out there. But again, it's just, we'd have to be, you know, 100+ feet north of K32, and then you can't, if you're coming down the road, you can't see it.
Right.
That's our biggest challenge, is visibility from the location.
Okay.
You know, we've talked about, do you potentially put it, I mean, you know, we have more traffic come south on 4th Street and into this area than probably any other street in the city as far as traffic volumes. So you put it up here at the north end of our property.
Right.
Do
I
you
just,
put it at, do we do something at the north end of town, AKA within the
Right.
roundabout?
I just think it, I don't know, something needs to be done
Yeah.
just because I
I just
think
don't know the location.
so many events have happened and.
Let's put it in the railroad right away.
I'm okay with that.
Dak, will you fill it?
Man, come on, man, wait till they get done with this.
Let's let it-
Yeah. Oh, man.
Maybe we can hang it, you know, the signal arms and the lights.
There
maybe
you
we
go.
can Put it up on top of it.
Hang it
I
across
don't
the
know
highway.
if they go. It's a great idea. That is our challenge.
Right.
It's not really a matter of can we get it to work, can we get it built, can we get it done? If we have.
Where do you put
I
it?
mean, we just haven't found a location that then if you're gonna spend, you know, that, you know, 50, 60,000, whatever that number was, 40,000, you know, you want it to be useful and have a right location.
Mhm.
And that's been the challenge. Where's that spot? I mean, even if you go across the street, even if you bought land, you potentially could buy land on the other side of it. You know,
Okay.
on the,
Just put it in our back pocket.
right.
I'm going to keep bringing it up. Chief Woodham, thank you again for doing those toy drives. I love that program. And Chief Mathies, congratulations on the door opening up, so to speak. Conversations, working together. Who extended the olive branch?
From the mayor's office.
Interesting, I like that.
Some of that comes from the law enforcement background degrees and the experience there of not having that group, seeing that group together, though we did informally do some of that. This is more of just kind of a spearhead from, which I thought was really positive. It's a good place for that to come. So have that office kind of behind the movement, if you will.
And you're in the office, it sounds like, too. That's refreshing to
Yeah,
hear that working together. And will you keep us updated on any?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we're going to try that once a month in a more formal setting. We have a more informal luncheon type thing every couple of months with band levels, so we kind of know our number twos know their number twos. That sort of thing when you're talking and you maybe not be able to get the chief's office, but you know the deputy chief or that captain of that division or something. So we've been trying that as kind of just get some dialogue and put faces and names, you know, because we will have, there will be a situation where we need services and, you know, some backup from those agencies, whether it's Bonner, the sheriff, or Casey Day, the school police, you know, we have 3 of those. And so when there's an event, you will see the collective. And now's the time for us to start thinking on the same page. And it's not going to be a matter of who's in control. You'll know, and we'll be able to, you know, do these things consistently with each other. That's really the goal of the whole thought process. And then we've added this one last layer with the mayor's office making invitations. So I think everybody's embracing it. And again, I think there are some just changes, technological, some procedure and policy things that will kind of trickle down. We need to know these things to be involved. So I think that's good.
I would give some credit also to our friends in Bonner. So on the 911, it really came out of that meeting, came out of some contract negotiations because the old contract, that they were going through some of the various contracts they had with UG, ID Loring, and some of those things. And so the whole thing around 911, the 911 system, which kind of pipes to the dispatching, right? 911 is the call process, market funding, and then you have the actual dispatching function. And so some of that came out of, as those discussions were going on, then we started having discussions about that specific contract, the 911 contract itself and the dispatching. So they kind of helped push that, which was an issue that we'd all talked about for different reasons. but I think that really helped us. And I will say, you know, I'm just attending this first meeting. You know, I was asked, but just really about volume. They, in the month of May, had 32,000 911 calls go through there, another 19,000 non-emergent calls. And they have two, and they have
Only 50% of their staff.
50% of that, and they only have two call, they technically only have, they can grow it, but two call takers. And I mean, there's several people in this room that have worked in fire and law enforcement area, you know, understand? So all of a sudden you have a big event and you're getting dozens, I mean, maybe the same event, but you're getting dozens of calls. And now maybe the dispatcher that's serving, say our fire dispatcher working the Bonner Edwardsville has to start taking calls, and they're trying to do that. And then all of a sudden something else goes on. I was truly amazed at the volume of calls. And I think they said they have 40 funded positions for that, right? So typically 7 would be the ideal, 7 on every shift, right? So 21 to make a full day. They have 20 full-time people employed out of the 40 spots. We should be concerned. I mean, as our own city, we should be concerned about it because it's our people's safety. And that's kind of what I said, you know, hey, what can we do to help transition that, right? Because it's our people that are at risk safety-wise. If our dispatchers can't keep in contact with our fire and our police and help us get there, our citizens are at risk, our officers are at risk, firefighters are at risk. That's a pretty serious challenge. And it's not that I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more to it. It's not they're just going, oh, well, it's too bad, it's 20 people. I mean, I think they have a lot of hurdles and things they have to get over and through, and they're trying other staffing models. But being only 50% staff in that critical position is something we should collectively be concerned about. And if we're talking to people that impact that, we should help express that.
And that certainly is a reason. That's ongoing. That's a very, very tough place to recruit. That particular job. There's some strategies that they're implementing that I think are innovative. They're very positive, forward thinking, not just what we talked about at the meeting, but this meeting today was brought up again. And I think there's some backing of being creative, get the people through the door, because that's what they need. These bodies want to do that particular job. And they have to, I think there are some things that will help that, but they are overtasked at that particular job. Of course, we're reliant on them to know where our officers are at and what they're doing. That's concerning when they're just overly tasked. They can make it. So they are doing things about it.
I thought it was a valuable meeting from that. You know, I mean, I look at it different than the two chiefs might look at those functions, right, as a manager. And I think that's what was good about it. That meeting also included the managers from the 3 cities or a representative, right? So obviously you've got the men and women that are doing that frontline work, the people that are in the field, but they've got to be able to be supported from the top as well. I mean, say that's an important position and an operation in our city, and we have to figure out how we support that. But I heard that and those numbers, and that didn't include the fire. The fire it has its own staffing, and they're in pretty good shape at the moment, but they've been on the other side. I mean, that is a lot of calls. I didn't realize that kind of call volume. Kind of sorry. Thank you.
Wish everybody happy, safe 4th of July. Hopefully, we don't get a lot of calls.
Yeah.
Woo. How many stands do we have? 3?
We are always capped at 3. We will have 1 at 4th and 8th.
Saw that.
From Mark. The one of the old auto finders and the new Liquor Express and the lots, those are Fritz fireworks. We decided to have 2 camps Both, definitely both good to them.
Yes, I do.
You make them. On the third, I'll be in there.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you.
That's all you got. Just a couple things. I'll make it pretty quick. Eminent domain, once again, anytime we're dealing with individuals' property and homeowner rights, I think it would be fantastic just to update our policy a little bit and reaching out to those individuals just to give them notice, hey, we're talking about your particular property tonight, even though we're not going to negotiate on a one-on-one basis, just so they have a heads up that it's coming to council. I think that's just going above and beyond to make sure that we're treating people how we want to be treated. Mill levy, I know you guys have heard me talk about this before. I know prices are going up. It costs the city extra money, but it's really, really painful on the individual household budgets too. And just because the tax appraisal goes up doesn't necessarily that we need to spend more as a city. And it certainly doesn't put more money in the pockets of the homeowners because it's going to cost them more. And so just keeping that in mind as we're talking about the budgets that we want to maintain and take care of our buildings, take care of our staff, make sure everybody's safe and happy. But keeping in mind that our individuals, our citizens that live here are really feeling the crunch in their budgets too. And so we want to make sure that we're balancing that well. ARPA discussions are coming up. Mike mentioned that earlier. I wanted to encourage everyone on the council and anyone that might watch this later, please email our commissioners. Please email the Wyandotte County Mayor CEO and encourage them to support the grant request that we have put forward. They have an opportunity now to sort of rectify the discrepancy from CARES Act money that we didn't see that came through our county. They have the opportunity now to show that they are interested in the citizens of Edwardsville and want to invest in our part of the county as well. So I just wanted to encourage everyone to please email the commissioners and the mayor to say, please support these opportunities. We've got an Edwardsville mobile pantry coming up in a couple weeks. That'll be open if you know anybody. The registration will probably go out here in the next day or two. If you know anyone in need in the community or in the area that some groceries would help out, please let them know to follow the city Facebook page and there will be a sign up there. And then just wanted to thank the Parks and Rec and then also the fire department. We've had some great events in the last few weeks through the arts program, Junior Fire Academy, the splash pad. I know the kids are really loving it and it's great to have things for the community to look forward to, especially during the summer months when they're home. Thanks. Have a great and safe 4th of July.